The armed forces of Ukraine continue to conduct an offensive operation on the Melitopol and Berdiansk fronts. They defend reconquered areas and carry out counter-battery measures. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 1800 on the 9th of July. Details: During the day, the Russians inflicted 27 airstrikes and 37 attacks from multiple launch missile systems on the positions of Ukrainian troops and settlements. There are dead and wounded among the civilians. Residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure were damaged. The Russian units focused their main efforts on the Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts. Heavy battles continue. During the day, there were 27 combat clashes. On the Volyn and Polishcha fronts, the operational situation didn't change significantly. No signs of the formation of offensive groups were recorded. On the Severshchina and Slobozhanshchina fronts, during the day, the occupying forces carried out attacks from mortars and artillery, targeting 10 settlements. In particular, amongst them were Vintorivka, Iskryskivshchina, Yastrubin in Sumy Oblast, as well as Yudy, Veteranarn and Vovchansk in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian soldiers hold their defense steadfastly. The Russians landed airstrikes in the areas of Kolodyaznaya and Kyslivka, Kharkiv Oblast. Krasny Persh, Fyholivka, Vorokny, Kupiansk and Kyslivka were subjected to artillery and mortar attacks of the Russians. On the Lyman front, the Russians conducted assault actions and tried to oust Ukrainian troops from their positions in the area west of Spryan, Donetsk Oblast, but had no success. They also delivered airstrikes in the areas of Novosadova, Ivanivka, Serebryanka Forest and Spern in Donetsk Oblast. Over 10 settlements were subjected to artillery shelling, in particular Nevsky, Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast, as well as Torsky, Spern, Berestov, Vesel in Donetsk Oblast. On the Bakhmut front, under the dense fire of Russian aircraft and artillery, Ukraine's forces successfully repelled attacks near the village of Dubovo-Vasilivka, Donetsk Oblast. The Russians inflicted airstrikes in the areas of the settlements of Oleksandro-Shultin and Pivnikny. Over 10 settlements were affected by Russian artillery shelling, including Markov, Bodanivka, Kromov and Ivanovsky, Donetsk Oblast. On the Avdiivka front, the Ukrainian troops continued to deter the offensive of Russian troops near the city of Avdiivka. Meanwhile, the Russians shelled more than 10 settlements, in particular, Novokolinov, Lastochkin, Avdiivka, Sievern, Pervomaisk and Nevelsky in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, Ukrainian defenders repelled all Russian attacks in the area of the city of Marinka while being subjected to artillery attacks. The Russians launched an airstrike near Krasnohorivka. They shelled more than 10 settlements, including Krasnohorivka, Marinka, Heorhivka, Maximilianivka, Yelizavetivka and Katerinivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive operations in the area of Novomikhailivka, Donetsk Oblast. They attacked more than 10 settlements, in particular, Novomikhailivka, Vuhledar, Novokranka, Prekostivka, Zolotaniva, Shakhtarsk and Vlika Novosilka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, the Russians focused their main efforts on preventing further advancement of Ukrainian troops. They inflicted airstrikes in the areas of Rivnopil and Novodanilivka in Zaporizhia Oblast, as well as Kozatsky in Kherson Oblast. They carried out artillery shelling of more than 20 settlements, including Temirivka, Novodorivka, Chervon, Huliaipol, Zaliznikny, Orikhiv in Zaporizhia Oblast, as well as Berislav, Vesel, Antonivka, Bilozerka in Kherson Oblast and the city of Kherson. At the same time, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to conduct an offensive operation on Melitopol and Berdiansk fronts, defending reconquered areas, and carrying out counter-battery measures. During the day, the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine targeted one cluster of Russian personnel. Units of rocket forces and artillery hit 2 clusters of personnel, weapons and military equipment, 2 artillery systems in combat positions and 2 electronic warfare stations of the Russian invaders. Ukraine's defense forces gained ground on 2 fronts, General Staff report. Ukrainian defenders are conducting counter-offensive actions on the Melitopol and Berdiansk fronts, and consolidating their positions. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 10th of July. Details. Over the past 24 hours, Russian occupiers carried out 30 airstrikes and fired 47 times from multiple launch missile systems. There were casualties among civilians, and residential buildings and other civilian infrastructure facilities were destroyed. Russian forces continue focusing their main efforts on the Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts, and heavy battles continue. Over 30 combat clashes took place on these fronts over the past day. Russian forces maintain a military presence on the Severshina and Slobozhanshina fronts. During the day, they conducted an airstrike near the village of Remyak in Chernihiv Oblast. They also carried out mortar and artillery attacks on more than 15 settlements, in particular, Bleshnya, Kostobobrev, Buchki in Chernihiv Oblast, Polyshivsky and Volfin in Sumy Oblast, and Udi, Vovchansk in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian soldiers are holding their defense steadfastly. Russian forces conducted airstrikes in the areas of Kolodyazhne and Kyslivka in Kharkiv Oblast. Krasny Persh, Fyholivka, Vorokny, Kupiansk and Kyslivka in Kharkiv Oblast were fired on from artillery and mortars. On the Lyman front, Russian forces conducted assault actions and tried to oust Ukrainian troops from their positions in the area west of Spryn in Donetsk Oblast, but had no success. They carried out airstrikes in the areas of Novosado, Ivanivka, Serebryanka Forest and Spern in Donetsk Oblast. Over 10 settlements, in particular, Nevsky, Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast and Verkhnekamiansk, Rozdolivka, Beristow, Vesel in Donetsk Oblast, were hit by artillery fire. On the Bakhmut front, under dense fire from Russian aircraft and artillery, Ukraine's forces successfully repelled attacks near the village of Dubovo-Vasilivka in Donetsk Oblast. Russian forces launched airstrikes in the areas of Oleksandro-Shultin and Pivnikny. Over 15 settlements were affected by Russian artillery fire, including Kramatorsk, Chasev Yar, Delivka, Pivnikny and Pivden in Donetsk Oblast. On the Avdiivka front, the Ukrainian troops continue to deter the offensive by Russian troops near the city of Avdiivka. At the same time, Russian forces fired using artillery on more than 15 settlements, including Karamik, Verdichi, Avdiivka, Vodian and Karlivka in Donetsk Oblast. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces reported on July 10 that Russia had lost 234,480 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion on February 24 last year. This number includes 440 casualties Russian forces suffered just over the past day.